For centuries, maps from London to Amsterdam displayed a colossal civilization that stretched across half the planet. Then suddenly, it vanished.
We are dealing with the fingerprints of a lost civilization that mapped the world and that left evidence of that mapping.
Every textbook erased it. Every historian ignored it, and every explanation sounded forced. But fragments of architecture, symbols, and forgotten maps refuse to stay buried. My main message is that we have a so far untold backstory that we're concentrating in. Could there have been an empire so vast that its very existence threatened the powers rewriting history? The evidence is spreading fast, and what it suggests challenges everything we've been taught about the rise of civilization itself. Keep watching, because what you're about to see doesn't just question history. It may prove that an entire empire was deliberately erased, the civilization that shouldn't exist. From the 15th to the 18th century, European cartographers from France, England, the Netherlands, and Italy recorded a vast region labeled Tartaria. The name appeared across maps, globes, and atlases covering the territory from Siberia to the borders of China. But in modern history, that name has disappeared. Today, historians describe Tartaria as a mapping error, a general term used for lands beyond Europe's knowledge. Yet, the maps contradict this explanation. I think the best evidence for it is ancient maps, which show the world as it looked during. They include cities, rivers, mountain ranges, and political divisions, rendered with consistent accuracy by graphers who worked independently. Their precision indicates direct sources, not speculation. The evidence reportedly suggests that Tartaria was recognized as a functioning civilization. Maps describe organized provinces, capitals, and defined borders. These details imply administration, infrastructure, and continuity. My main message is that we have a so far untold backstory that we're concentrating in. Such documentation across centuries cannot be dismissed as coincidence. If Tartaria truly existed, its disappearance would be one of history's greatest anomalies. Empires do not simply evaporate. They crumble. They fracture. They leave behind the bones of their greatness in ruins, inscriptions, and the scars of conquest. Yet Tartaria, if real, did none of these things. It did not burn. It did not fall beneath an invading army. It simply vanished. No ashes, no chronicles, no heirs to tell its story. It was as if the empire was not destroyed, but deliberately forgotten. Its downfall was not a battle lost, but a silence imposed. An empire erased, not by sword or fire, but by the quiet precision of record-keeping itself. For nearly 3 centuries, Tartaria appeared in European scholarship. Its removal in the 19th century coincided with geopolitical change. The silence that followed suggests deliberate suppression rather than ignorance. Political motives, imperial expansion, ideological unification, or the control of historical narrative likely dictated its disappearance. The maps themselves show evolution, not error. Early versions marked boundaries with limited precision, but later editions defined tributaries, mountain passes, and cities with increasing detail. The persistence of Tartaria's depiction across successive generations of scholars shows a shared consensus, not cartographic fantasy. Such consistency across independent sources indicates a recognized geopolitical reality that later historians chose to overlook. Moreover, the mystery deepens when one considers the voices of the time, merchants, diplomats, and explorers, whose travel accounts align with those old maps. These were not dreamers or mythmakers, but witnesses of their age. Men who crossed deserts and steppes, who wrote of vast territories they called Tartary. Their testimonies, scattered across journals and letters, seem to echo from the edges of forgotten history. Fragments of a world that official records have since allowed to fade into obscurity. References to Tartarian trade routes, royal encampments, and fortified cities appear throughout European and Asian archives. The level of administrative sophistication described contradicts the idea of Tartaria as uncharted wilderness. The removal of its name from geography is therefore not simply a correction of early seagraphy, but a restructuring of historical perception. Tartaria was acknowledged, recorded, and then eliminated. Its disappearance reflects not the discovery of truth, but the redirection of it. But now there's proof that the Tartarian Empire is real, and it's not what you think. Ancient lineages and early records. Before the 20th century, many European historians treated Tartaria as a legitimate civilization. Texts such as Edwin Williams' Comprehensive System of Modern Geography, 1825, and William Russell's historical works described it as a structured society with lineage law and architecture. These accounts linked the Tartars and Mongols through shared ancestry, describing hereditary rulers and defined political systems. They detailed fortified settlements and organized military hierarchies, contradicting the modern portrayal of the region as a landscape of nomads. The records identified a social order maintained through governance rather than tribal alliance. 18th and 19th century scholars also incorporated Tartaria into the prevailing biblical framework of world history, identifying its founders as descendants of Japhet, son of Noah. Though the theological context reflects the limits of the era's scholarship, it shows that Tartaria was considered part of human civilization, not a mythological construct. Descriptions of infrastructure, defensive walls, and trade routes align with archaeological evidence of large-scale settlements across Central Asia, predating the Mongol Empire. These sources imply that Genghis Khan's conquests may have reorganized pre-existing states rather than created them. Tartaria, if it ever existed as more than a name on ancient maps, could represent something extraordinary, a continuity of culture that flowed quietly beneath the surface of recorded history. It might have bridged the medieval world in the modern age, carrying forward traditions, technologies, and architectures that official timelines failed to trace. In that sense, Tartaria would not merely be a lost empire, but a hidden thread weaving together centuries that history has chosen to keep apart. Some early geographers such as Joseph Priestley and Jean-Baptiste Bourguignon d'Anville reference trade systems connecting Tartaria to China and the Persian Gulf. Records of silk, iron, and livestock exchange indicate established commerce rather than sporadic nomadic trade. The evidence supports the existence of an organized network rather than scattered clans. This challenges the assumption that the Mongol Empire marked the first organized power across Eurasia. Instead, it may have been a successor to a far older structure, one that maintained trade, governance, and engineering long before European contact. If these accounts are accurate, Tartaria was not an imagined region, but a tangible civilization, subsequently divided and absorbed by expanding empires. Its disappearance from the historical record would then represent not loss, but removal. Now, since Tartaria was real, the question becomes, how and why was it erased from modern history? The erasement of an empire. By the early 20th century, Tartaria no longer appeared in academic or public discourse. The 1910 Encyclopaedia Britannica contained no reference to it, though earlier editions devoted entire sections to its geography and people. Within one generation, an entity once mapped across continents had been deleted from collective knowledge. This erasure coincided with Russian imperial expansion across Central and Eastern Asia. As new borders were drawn, regions once labeled Tartaria were renamed and absorbed as Russian territories. The change was presented as progress, the transformation of wilderness into civilization. The narrative redefined the local populations as tribes rather than nations, and recast their history as primitive. To reinforce this narrative, the term Golden Horde was applied to earlier Tartarian domains. In official accounts, the empire was reframed as a nomadic horde rather than a state. The administrative systems and infrastructure described in earlier records were omitted, replaced by depictions of chaos and conquest. Contemporary historians, including William Tuke in Russia, A Complete Historical Account, 1780, recorded evidence that contradicted this portrayal. Tuke reportedly described permanent settlements, hereditary leadership, and remnants of defensive structures extending across the steppes. Such documentation indicated stability and governance, not transience. Archaeological findings from the 19th century, buried fortresses, irrigation systems, and trade artifacts also challenged the simplified image of nomadic tribes. Despite these discoveries, imperial and Soviet scholarship rarely incorporated them into official narratives. Instead, they were catalogued without cultural attribution, removing connections to Tartaria entirely. If Tartaria had never existed, its traces, urban foundations, fortifications, and consistent references across centuries should not appear in historical or physical evidence. So, Tartarian theory is the idea that thousands of years ago, a world-spanning, hyper-technologically advanced, global empire spread throughout the entire world. The selective removal of these details from later narratives suggests intentional revision. By erasing Tartaria's history, imperial powers could justify annexation as rightful inheritance rather than conquest. This mirrors a familiar pattern in history. When new powers rise, they rewrite the past to secure their rule. Dominant states absorb the legacies of those before them, reshaping memory to legitimize their authority. If Tartaria was erased, it may not have been forgotten by accident, but absorbed by design. A quiet conquest through the rewriting of history. By redefining Tartaria as myth, the Russian Empire legitimized its control of Eurasia's interior and presented expansion as the continuation of a single civilizational lineage. The disappearance of Tartaria from maps and encyclopedias was therefore not the result of scholarly correction, but of political necessity. The empire was replaced in record, its memory reassigned to those who conquered its land. Today, its remnants remain in early maps, neglected texts, and unearthed ruins scattered across the Eurasian plain. These fragments challenge the official chronology of the empire and reportedly reveal a consistent pattern of suppression. The proof is here. The surviving evidence, architectural remains, geographic continuity, and early documentation confirms that Tartaria was once acknowledged as real, then deliberately removed from history. The material traces of that lost civilization still stand, preserved in architecture and artifacts that defy official timelines. Yet the stones tell a hidden story, linking distant cities with a precision that defies recorded history. What lost civilization left these marks, and why were they erased? Architecture that defies the narrative. Across Russia and Central Asia stand structures that do not align with the timelines officially assigned to them. Their documented histories are brief, but their materials and designs suggest earlier origins. The Suyan Bike Tower in Kazan is one such case, a multi-tiered structure attributed by Soviet historians to the reign of Ivan the Terrible. They reportedly claimed it was built in a week. Architectural analysis, however, reveals advanced geometry, brickwork precision, and proportional systems closer to Renaissance-era mathematics. Its foundations use construction methods absent from 16th-century records. In 1854, Edward Tellelly described it as the last relic of Tartar architecture, implying an origin predating Imperial Russia. The same inconsistencies appear elsewhere. Moscow's Kazansky Station, dated to 1940, features pre-industrial design elements and iconography inconsistent with its era. Its clock face replaces numbers with zodiac constellations. Symbols incongruent with Soviet atheism. The stone joints and ornamental patterns reflect craftsmanship more typical of medieval architecture than 20th century engineering. Such details suggest adaptation or reconstruction of an older framework, rather than original Soviet design. These patterns recur throughout Eurasia. Many structures combine European star fort geometry with Central Asian and Islamic motifs aligning with celestial or geographic markers. The precision implies a level of astronomical and surveying knowledge beyond that of the eras credited with their construction. Restoration cannot fully explain the consistency or accuracy across so many sites. Taken together, these examples suggest a unified architectural tradition spanning multiple regions and political periods. The uniformity in proportion and technique indicates shared principles or a common source of knowledge now absent from modern architectural history. The surviving evidence implies that these are remnants of a larger cultural system, one erased, reattributed, and absorbed into later imperial narratives. Symbols carved into those stones reveal even more the banners and crests of a forgotten empire. What if everything we thought we knew about Eurasia's past was built on a lie, and a single symbol holds the key to a vanished empire? The symbols of an erased nation. Among surviving artifacts appears a recurring emblem, a winged serpent known as the Zealand. It is depicted on coins, seals, banners, and military standards from multiple centuries. The same image appears in naval charts from 1709 and heraldic compilations from the 19th century. Historical references identify it as the emblem of Tartaria, a state once occupying the core of Eurasia. The Zealand's disappearance from official imagery coincided with the rise of Christian iconography across the region. The creature was replaced by the figure of Saint George slaying a dragon, a symbolic inversion of Tartarian sovereignty. The former national emblem was redefined as an emblem of evil, marking a cultural transition from independence to subjugation. Later adaptations of the symbol in Russian imperial art depict the dragon beneath the feet of saints and rulers, reinforcing its defeat. This transformation reflected the political and religious shift that accompanied the integration of Tartarian territories into Christian empires. Erasing the Zealand from heraldry erased the political identity it represented. As imperial influence expanded, local beliefs and iconography were recast to align with Western religious norms. The replacement of indigenous symbols served to legitimize new authority and eliminate competing narratives. Today, the Zealand survives only in regional insignias such as that of Kazan, where it functions as a civic emblem detached from its historical meaning. Yet, the continuity of its form across centuries suggests that it once represented a significant power structure. Its persistence, even in altered form, indicates that complete erasure was never achieved. While symbols can be rewritten, maps preserve what rulers cannot fully erase. What if the maps themselves were hiding the truth, erasing entire civilizations while the world watched? Unaware that Tartaria once spanned from sea to sea, maps that refused to lie, European cartography from the 16th to 18th centuries consistently recorded Tartaria as a defined region. Works such as Ortelius's Theatuum Orbis Terrarum in 1570 and Dale's Carte d'Azy in 1700 depicted Great Tartary stretching from the Caspian Sea to the Pacific, divided into subregions like independent Tartary and Chinese Tartary. These were not speculative depictions. They included named cities, river systems, and borders comparable to those of contemporary empires. Such consistency across maps from England, France, and the Netherlands contradicts claims that Tartaria was a myth. Their repeated inclusion of Tartaria across centuries indicates recognition, not error. Tartary was replaced by Siberia, reframing a once political region as an uninhabited frontier. This shift coincided with administrative consolidation under the Romanovs and later Soviet power. The disappearance was not geographical. It was ideological. Seagraphy reflects political intent as much as geography. Map revisions mirrored the reorganization of territorial control. By removing Tartaria from maps, empires removed it from historical consciousness. In less than 50 years, a documented civilization was replaced by the concept of wilderness. The elimination of Tartaria from global maps was not a product of natural decline or conquest alone. It represented a controlled process of redescription, a deliberate act of redefining cultural memory through the instruments of state geography. Theories of catastrophe suggest that Tartaria did not merely fall, but was physically buried. The mud flood hypothesis. A controversial theory proposes that Tartaria's disappearance was not only political, but geological. The mud flood hypothesis suggests that a sudden large-scale event buried parts of Eurasian civilization beneath sediment layers, erasing physical evidence of its cities. Researchers cite buildings worldwide with ground floors partially submerged, windows below street level, and entrances now below the surface. Examples appear in St. Petersburg, Prague, and Paris, as well as in parts of North America. These similarities across continents challenge the explanation of gradual urban buildup. The uniformity suggests a single rapid event. Mainstream science attributes these conditions to reconstruction, changing infrastructure, or natural sediment accumulation. However, the identical depth and pattern of submersion in multiple cities remain unexplained. So in the end, the Tartarian believers, they're totally right. Except the buildings that they are worried about losing are the exact ones that actually took their buildings in the first place, and are the ones that are trying to control them. Proponents argue that the mud flood could have destroyed surface-level architecture, leaving only upper structures later repurposed by new regimes. Some architectural anomalies cited include massive stonework, unaccounted-for precision in alignment, and the reuse of buried foundations in modern government buildings and cathedrals. These features exceed the documented technical capacity of the historical periods credited with their construction. While the theory lacks geological consensus, it raises legitimate questions about sudden environmental events and their role in reshaping historical landscapes. Whether the cause was natural or engineered, the effect was the same. A widespread loss of material culture followed by the rewriting of history. The persistence of buried architecture in unrelated regions suggests that humanity's record of the past is incomplete. The debate continues between those who see coincidence and those who see catastrophe, but both agree that the anomalies are real and widespread. If destruction explains its fall, suppression explains its silence, and that suppression reached its height under Soviet control. The erased record. In 1944, as the Red Army advanced through Eastern Europe, another operation unfolded under direct orders from Joseph Stalin. Nearly 200,000 Crimean Tatars were allegedly deported from their homeland in a mass expulsion labeled as punishment for collaboration with the enemy. Entire villages were cleared within days. Families were forced onto freight trains bound for Central Asia, marking the beginning of a campaign not just of displacement, but of historical erasure. The deportation was only one aspect of a larger policy to dismantle a culture. Declassified Soviet documents, including the 1957 report, National Cultural Development Under Communism, reveal an explicit directive: revise the history of Tartaria to eliminate nationalistic character. The instruction targeted not only Crimea, but the broader historical identity associated with Tartaria. It was a coordinated effort to remove an entire civilization from collective memory. The process was systematic. Libraries were emptied of records, manuscripts destroyed or hidden in restricted archives, and monuments renamed. Religious buildings were stripped of inscriptions, converted to warehouses or state facilities. School curricula eliminated references to Tartaria, replacing them with terms compatible with Soviet ideology. By the 1950s, official maps labeled the region only as Central Asia or Siberia. The manipulation extended to scholarship. Historians were ordered to align interpretations with Marxist doctrine. Documents that contradicted state narratives were destroyed. One internal memorandum stated plainly, "Histories which present the facts truthfully have been withdrawn and destroyed." The intent was total: to remove evidence of a cultural lineage that predated and contradicted Soviet identity. Western governments did little to contest this revision. During the early Cold War, political priorities outweighed academic scrutiny. U.S. intelligence records allegedly admitted that strategic partnership precluded interference with Soviet historical reconstruction. The result was a global silence that allowed an entire cultural identity to disappear without challenge. By mid-century, the term Tartaria had been erased from atlases, encyclopedias, and academic discourse. Where earlier maps showed a defined region, later editions replaced it with blank geography. A civilization once described across centuries of European documentation ceased to exist on paper. Yet traces endure, and their reemergence would reignite a debate over what was lost and why. The convergence of evidence. In the late 20th century, historians, linguists, and independent researchers began comparing sources long considered irrelevant. The findings allegedly revealed consistencies that could not easily be dismissed. European maps from the 17th to 19th centuries labeled vast territories from the Urals to the Pacific as the Great Tartar. Architectural surveys reportedly identified structures across Russia, Central Asia, and Eastern Europe with stylistic similarities unexplained by their documented eras. Each fragment of evidence, viewed alone, could be attributed to error or misunderstanding. Together, they formed a recurring pattern. Historical records reference Tartaria as a political entity long after other empires, Ottoman, Mughal, Qing, were formally recognized. Linguistic studies revealed shared root words and dialects across regions, now separated by modern borders, indicating long-term cultural exchange. Declassified British and Russian records confirmed that the term Tartary appeared in official usage well into the 19th century. Its sudden disappearance in later documents lacked explanation. The omission coincided with intensified political centralization within the Russian Empire and later Soviet control, suggesting deliberate redefinition. This growing collection of maps, architectural evidence, and archival material indicates that the erasure of Tartaria was intentional. Political systems dependent on controlling historical narrative often suppress alternative accounts of origin and influence. When the existence of a prior civilization threatened that control, its memory was systematically overwritten. For years, Western academics dismissed Tartaria as a cartographic mistake, a vestige of outdated European geography. But new analyses of city foundations, construction techniques, and engineering patterns reveal anomalies inconsistent with the historical record. These findings have reopened debate about whether Tartary represented an organized civilization, later absorbed and erased by imperial expansion. The cumulative evidence now challenges the official narrative. The consistency of references across time and geography indicates not confusion, but suppression. As documentation resurfaces, the picture grows clearer. An entire chapter of human development was removed from accepted history through political and ideological intervention. For researchers, this moment marks a turning point. The convergence of evidence maps, architecture, linguistics, and declassified records renders denial untenable. The data align too precisely to dismiss. The proof is here. The traces of Tartaria demonstrate that its existence was recorded, recognized, and later concealed under deliberate policy. The implications of that rediscovery reach far beyond historical accuracy. The revelation and its implications. The reemergence of Tartaria's historical record exposes the vulnerability of official history to manipulation. What can be erased once can be erased again, and what remains depends on who controls documentation. The question is no longer whether Tartaria existed, but what its disappearance reveals about the mechanisms of information control. When Stalin ordered the destruction of Tartarian records, he exercised an authority as old as the empire, the ability to redefine reality through selective memory. This practice was not unique to the Soviet Union. Throughout history, regimes have censored archives, repurposed monuments, and rewritten education to legitimize power. Tartaria's removal illustrates this process at its most complete. A civilization reconstructed into absence. If Tartaria was a significant regional power, its erasure undermines conventional models of cultural evolution. Its architecture shows advanced understanding of materials and geometry inconsistent with standard historical timelines. Its removal from record suggests that political convenience outweighed factual accuracy. The event demonstrates that suppression can distort not only identity, but the perceived trajectory of civilization itself. Yet traces of Tartaria persist. The name appears in early atlases, travelers' journals, and official reports. Architectural symbols recur in multiple regions. These remnants indicate continuity that censorship could not fully destroy. Each recovered document, each verified artifact restores fragments of a narrative once thought lost. The broader implications extend to all recorded history. The case of Tartaria demonstrates that history is curated, not comprehensive. What survives depends less on truth than on utility to those in power. Recognizing this fact redefines how we evaluate evidence and how we understand our collective past. The rediscovery of Tartaria challenges assumptions about the linear progression of civilization. It highlights the possibility that knowledge once suppressed can resurface through persistent inquiry. The erasure of Tartaria was extensive but not absolute. Its remnants now serve as evidence of both a lost culture and the systems that sought to eliminate it. History, no matter how rewritten, leaves residues. Beneath political revision and ideological pressure, authentic records endure. The story of Tartaria is not only about a vanished empire. It is a demonstration that truth, though buried, can outlast those who attempt to silence it. If the proof of a lost empire truly exists, what does that mean for the history we've always believed? Share your thoughts in the comments.